We've had this 2003 Jaguar XJ8 4.2 Sport model now for well over 6 years, and we've done loads to it in those years. But now the time has come finally to put it up for sale. But before it goes under the hammer here at Southwestern Vehicle Auctions, we thought we'd take it for one final drive to find out what it's really like to live with a Jaguar X350. So there are many reasons why the Jaguar X350 is a fantastic modern classic. And perhaps to understand the reasons why, it's worth us just going back in time a little bit to discuss this generation XJ's origins. I mean, remember, Ford took over the brand at the tail end of 1989, at which point the company was probably in some challenging circumstances. The XJS was an aging product. The XJ40 was quite new, but had had some reliability challenges, shall we say, which probably set it back a little bit. So when Ford got involved, they quite rightly rolled their sleeves up and invested millions and millions redeveloping the factories at Castle Bromwich and Browns Lane. The XJ40 was given a much needed makeover, and that ultimately led to the X300 in '94 and then the X308 V8 powered XJ in 1997, and by that point they'd also replaced the XJS with the XK8 coupe and convertible. But the V8 X308 that was on sale by the end of the 90s was effectively still the XJ40 underneath. It self-launched in 1986, and the development for that car goes as far back as the late 70s. So the X350 is the first all-new saloon designed, built, developed while Jaguar was under Ford ownership. So those talented engineers at Whitley wasted no time developing a new ground-up concept, something that met all of the criticisms of the old model and built on the success of those old cars as well. So the first thing they did was adopt a very sophisticated aluminium construction. And we're not just talking about aluminium panels like an Audi A8. The whole way the car was built, a proper aluminium skeleton, and the panels were bonded and riveted to that aluminium shell to give it this almost advanced aviation style construction. And what that meant is that the car was both lightweight and yet rigid and high quality. They also spent some time dealing with the interior packaging, one of the flaws of the predecessor. So to that extent they made it longer, wider and taller to make sure that the interior space was certainly on a par with its competitors at BMW and Mercedes. They then tried to tackle some of the quality issues that had beset the earlier cars. So while this interior is largely, I guess, considered quite bland, it's very, very Jaguar. It's got this lovely sort of acreage of wood and leather. And crucially though, unlike its predecessor, it's really well made and it's really good quality. So they've really focused on all of those improvements. Sadly, that sophisticated aluminium construction did beset the development of this car, and it was probably about a year or so late to market, and therefore it was debuted at the Paris Motor Show in 2002 and went on sale in pretty much all markets in 2003. And this particular example is one of those very early cars. It's quite an unusual spec, being a 4.2 short wheelbase sport model. But UK viewers may spot that this is a 52 reg and therefore is a pre-March 2003 car, so probably within the first 1,000 built. And we've got here the 4.2 normally aspirated V8 with 300 horsepower, and it is such a fantastic unit by then. All those early idiosyncrasies of the V8 engine as it first came out in '96, all those issues with Nicosil and the like, have all been dealt with. So what you've got here is a really solid, reliable, capable power plant. It's beautifully quiet, wonderfully refined at sort of low to medium revs, and yet put your foot down and there's a lovely honed but deliberate V8 growl there. It's just delicious. And the V8's mated then to a 6-speed ZF automatic gearbox with sport mode and winter mode thrown in for good measure. It delivers the power to the rear wheels with such smoothness, such refinement. It's a really good partner to this particular power plant. It's got air suspension, so it's meant to be a bit more taut at high speeds and still deliver a nice corsetting ride. And while it's probably not quite as supple as the X308 that it replaced, the overall ride and handling balance of the 350 is fantastic. Now, we've had this car now since about 2017, so somewhere between 6 and 7 years as I record this in 2024. And we've just done so much to it. We paid about £2,500 for this car. And as you can imagine, it probably wasn't in the best condition when we bought it. Some of the exterior paint probably wasn't in the best shape. The headlights were all clouded up, and there were a myriad of warning lights up that we had to tackle. So when we took the project on, we did what you should do in these situations and just methodically and carefully work through all the things that needed doing. There was an ABS warning light up, and that was just a sensor on the rear wheel. It had the air suspension fault up, and that was ultimately down to the compressor for the air suspension, which we duly replaced. We gave it an absolute thorough service. It'd probably been left standing for quite a while, this car, so replacing all the oil, the coolant, the brake fluid, all of those things needed doing. The suspension was a bit tired, the anti-roll bar drop links, the front suspension bushes, all of those sort of things we replaced. We replaced the brake discs and pads. And slowly working through all of those maintenance items, nothing more, nothing less, this car was transformed, and we put it back into good service across loads of our brands, primarily Classics World magazine, or Classics Monthly as it was back then, and Jaguar World, as you can imagine. And we went all over the place. We went all over the UK. We travelled down to Monaco in this car. We've covered thousands and thousands of miles, and they've all been superb. The X350 is, I think, sublime to drive. It's got that lovely combination of refinement, comfort, luxury, and yet it's got that sporting edge when you want it. Thanks to that lightweight aluminium construction, it's actually very nimble down a twisty B road if you want it, but it will equally just cruise along on an autobahn or a motorway for hours on end, and you won't feel it at all. It's just superb. Just got waved at there by an X150 XK owner. We did take the plunge and invest in a respray for this car in 2020. While being aluminium, it shouldn't in theory rust. The way the paint reacts with the metal is one factor actually. So if the paint chips or gets scratched or marked in any way, sometimes the paint can react and it can start to bubble. And on lots of examples of X350s, you'll see paint bubbling up along things like the leading edge of the doors and the boot lid, and that's exactly what happened with this car. So we took the plunge and invested in a respray, and that was about £4,000, which was a lot of money, probably worth more than the car, although probably good value by today's standards. And a certain global pandemic probably delayed the return of the vehicle, but when we got it back in 2021, it was probably in as fine a condition as you're ever likely to be. And in that intervening 3 years, we've pressed it into service again, covering thousands of miles. And it's proven to be one of the best project cars we've ever had. It's been flawlessly reliable. All the things that have needed doing on this car are maintenance, wear and tear items. Its brakes, its tyres. The biggest expenditure, besides the respray, has been the air dampers, which we've finally replaced over the last couple of years. They're £1,000 each per corner plus fitting, so it's prohibitively expensive. But bearing in mind the original dampers lasted the best part of 20 years, it means that this suspension's now got 20 years of life left in it as well. So this car has now covered 157,000 miles, and it is just incredible how sort of flawless it is, really. And going back to that point about the interior and how well it's lasted, this is a shining example. This car's been out in all weathers and all conditions, and yet the fascia is not warped or cracked or split or worn in any way. The wood veneer is in an immaculate condition. These comfortable leather seats, all electrically adjustable, are in really good condition. The driver's seat's a little bit sort of creased, but it's not cracked, it's not sagging or worn or anything like that. It's just really held up those miles incredibly well. The steering wheel is remarkably original, despite all that arm twirling over that 150 odd thousand miles. Everything works, the air conditioning works, all the electrics work. The sat-nav's a bit temperamental, but given that, it's actually fine. Everything works as it should, even after 20 plus years and all that mileage. I think Jaguars sometimes get a really unfair rap for their alleged poor reliability, but the truth is this and many other of the modern Jaguars of the Ford era that we've owned have always proven to be very reliable. As long as you keep on top of the maintenance and you use them regularly, they shouldn't let you down, and this example is absolute proof of that. The prices of X350s is also a bit of a mind game, it has to be said. You find a low mileage XJR or flagship model and it will be worth well over £10,000, sometimes more, and to some extent it will be worth every penny. But find a high mileage example and one with perhaps not such a good service record and you'll be lucky to get more than about £1,500 for it. So it's quite hard to know really where to value these things, and I sincerely hope we get more than £1,500 for this car, but the mileage will no doubt detract some people from it. But know that it's very, very capable of doing that mileage and then some. I've certainly seen some with 200,000 miles on the clock. Not many, I grant you, but I have. I think it's actually nicer to drive than the 308. The X350 really is the car for all seasons and all reasons. It can do pretty much anything you want it to do. Long distances, short bursts, enthusiastic cross-country drives. It can do all of those things. I'm really going to miss it. It's been a fantastic project car, and I just hope it goes to a conscientious owner that looks after it and cherishes it. Because mark my words, these will become proper classics in the fullness of time, and they deserve it as well. The X350 is a really high watermark for Jaguar in my opinion. It's brilliantly well engineered, it's clearly reliable, it's good quality. I think they look good, they drive well. What's not to like about it? It is truly a fantastic modern classic, and I'm going to miss it. I'm going to miss it a lot.